Good morning, everyone. Welcome to SEMC. My name is Jason Hyde. I'm the youth pastor here. We are thankful that you have come to join us this morning. And if you are new to us this morning, thanks for being here. We have these connection cards in the chairs in front of you in those pockets. We'd like to invite you to fill that out and put that in the offering bag as it comes around later. So for those that maybe don't know, this is my first time doing announcements since being back from sabbatical. And I was at Providence for the last few months, and it was a fantastic time of study and rest. However, I'm really excited to be back with the youth now. I have a couple of announcements I want to share with you. Got quite a ring going on, eh? Should I use I'll use the cordless. Yeah, how's that? How's this? Okay. So over the, first announcement is we'd like to extend our condolences to the family of Mel Coop, specifically to his wife Mary, to Pastor Garth and Carly and their family, as well as the many other family members in this congregation. Mel passed away on Thursday morning, and Mel is a very active member of our church. He has served as a pastor here a while back, and the memorial for Mel Coop will take place on Tuesday here at SEMC at 2 p.m. Another announcement, over the last couple of months, while I was on sabbatical, I attended a few different worship services in local churches here in Steinbach, and I made a rather interesting observation during my time. So I attended this one particular church, and I remember I walked in by myself. My family was serving in the kids department here, so I went there by myself. I found my seat. I took in the worship service. I shook some hands with people during the welcome time, and then when the service concluded, I walked out, and there was this one particular person that caught me on the way out. But if not for this guy, I wouldn't have talked to anybody that morning, apart from saying hi and shaking a couple of hands. And I thought to myself, while the service was wonderful, what I experienced wasn't really church. You see, we often call the building the church, but the church is actually the people. We as followers of Jesus together, we are the church. And so God has built us for community and for relationships with one another. And so one of our desires for our congregation is that we would experience meaningful relationships with God and with one another. So if for any of you this is resonating with you, I invite you to be part of community. And so there's a lot of different ways you can experience community here at SEMC. I was chatting with our Sunday school superintendents this morning, and Sunday school is a wonderful place that you can begin to develop some community to. But we also have an open life group that takes place this Tuesday evening at 7 p.m. And so this is open to all adults, specifically those that are interested in being a part of a life group. And so if you are interested, this Tuesday at 7 p.m., Pastor Garth leads that. And so I invite you to talk to him after the service if you are interested in being a part of that. It's pretty casual, so come as you are, and it's a good time. So then, one other announcement. Next week Tuesday, January 28th, we'll have a prayer meeting called GAP. Details are in your bulletin, and so we'll give more details next week Tuesday about that. So you are invited. At this point, speaking of greeting and shaking some hands, I invite you to greet some people around you.
If you'd remain standing with us, we'll sing together. I was buried beneath and rescue. My sin was heavy. I threw it big at the weight of your glory. I needed shelter. I was an orphan. Now you call me a citizen of heaven. When I was broken, you were my healing. Now your love is the air that I'm breathing. I have a future. My eyes are open. 'Cause when you call my name, I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness, to your glorious day. You called my name. I ran out of that grave, out of the darkness, to your glorious day. There's nothing worth more that could ever come close. Nothing can compare. You're our living hope. Your presence. I've tasted and seen from the sweetest of loves, where my heart becomes free and my shame is undone. In your presence, Lord. Holy Spirit, you are welcome here. Come flood this place and fill the atmosphere. Your glory, God, is what our hearts long for. To be overcome by your presence, Lord. Your presence, Lord. There's nothing worth more that could ever come close. Nothing can compare. You're our living hope. Your presence, I've tasted and seen of the
Amen. Good morning, church. My name is Garth Coop. I'm one of the pastors here. Just a quick announcement, quick note for you. Church family, so very thankful for you. On behalf of our family, thank you for the way that you have loved us. You have shown your support. I don't know if I want to be anywhere else this morning, but right here. So thank you for that. I want to call Joel forward. Last week, Joel announced that he was resigning here, gave his resignation. And so I want to say, Joel, we appreciate you so much on behalf of the church family, on behalf of our staff. We love you very much. We are so thankful that you have shared your gifts of music, your gift of sports, and all of that kind of stuff with us over the last 3 years or so. On behalf of the church, we have purchased a Walrus Deep 6 compression for you. Cool. For us non-musicians, we have no idea what that means, but you know what that means. It's one of those foot pedal things that he often presses while he plays the guitar. Apparently musicians like that. And also a guitar strap. But we'd like to present you with the present, but the present isn't present, so we'll have to present you with the present at a different time. Okay, so, but it is in the works, and so you haven't seen the last of us yet. So what we'd like to do as we do as a church, we want to pray for Joel, and while we are sad that he is leaving us, we also want to just send him off with a blessing, with prayer, as he has taken on a full-time ministry position, a worship leading position with the meeting place in Winnipeg. And so we want to take some time to pray for Joel. And so I invite you, church family, if you'd like to come forward and to pray together with Joel or pray for Joel, come on up at this time. And we want to just send you off with a blessing for sure. We appreciate you. And we know that we haven't seen the last of him yet either.
That's right.
Okay? So...
Dear Jesus, it was 3.5 years ago. I had no idea in the world who Joel Jolly was. But in the last little, it didn't take long. He became a dear friend of mine, and I'm so thankful for him and the things he's taught me and the way he's encouraged me. It's such a testament to the man he is, the man who's seeking after your heart. And I just pray that as he leaves here and goes on to new ministries, he will bless that ministry as well, and just continue to work in his heart and help him to just draw closer to you every day and become more like you all the time.
Father God, I thank you so much again for Joel, Lord God. When I came here, Lord God, and I heard him when he first came up here and started playing, I was like, yes, this guy can play music. And I thank you, Lord, for gifting him with that. And Father God, I just pray that you will continue to bless him wherever he goes, Lord God, and help him to be a blessing to others like he was to me and this church, Lord God. And I just pray that you will just lift up, Lord God, others in the world, Lord God, who have this awesome talent, Lord God, and this gift that you've given them, so that they would rise up, Lord God, and use this gift like Joel did. And then I just pray that you will just bless him in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you, Heavenly Father, for Joel and for the gifts that he has shared with us. Lord, as he moves on to this new role, I pray that you would draw him ever closer to you, that he might deeply experience your presence, your love for him. And Lord, I pray that you grant him wisdom, Lord, in his role that he's going to have. That you help him to choose well and to minister faithfully in the places that he will be, in the circles he'll be in. Lord, I pray that you would do exceedingly more than he can hope for, and that he would see your hand at work in the places he goes.
Father, thank you for the ministry that Joel has shared with us here and how you've worked in his life and you've caused him to grow. I thank you for the humility that he has served us, a genuine realness. It comes out in the way he carries himself and the way he plays for you. I pray that you continue that as he continues to serve you now in a full-time role in this capacity. I pray for those at the meeting place that there would be some that you've already chosen to walk alongside him. and to be a strength and encouragement to him. And if a coach and mentor is needed, I pray that you would provide that as well for Joel, that he could learn from, but he would also be able to teach others. May he remain humble in your sight. May he find much joy in serving you. May he always be able to play the music that he loves. May he be able to play with honor and with integrity. I ask these in your precious name, Father, with thanksgiving. Amen.
Yes, Heavenly Father, thank you for Joel. Thank you for the gifts that you have given to him. Thank you for the time, the ministry years that he's had here, and how he has blessed our congregation by using the gifts that you've given to him. I pray, Father, that as he goes and he ministers at the meeting place, that he would find favor with the people, the congregation there, the people that he comes in contact with, the people that he leads in the worship ministries. And God, that he would have many years of fruitful ministry there. In Jesus' precious name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Good morning. Sorry. Good morning. Greeting church family from your church council. I'm here to provide you information and let you know what's happening concerning the Director of Worship Arts half-time position opening. As was shared last Sunday, the 12th, both by Joel Jolly, the current director, and myself, representing church council, Joel will be leaving his current position to take on a full-time role at the meeting place in Winnipeg starting Tuesday, January 28th. Before Pastor Gary left on sabbatical, Joel was able to inform him of this new opportunity and the expected timing of the change in mid-January. This was extremely helpful as our pastoral team of Gary, Garth, and Jason were able to discuss the upcoming change and transition and shared the recommendations to church council. This also gave time for prayer and discernment among the pastoral team and church council members before our first meeting of the year on January 6th, and we are pleased to share the plans going forward for the coming months. The position of Director of Worship Arts will be filled on an interim basis over the coming months, helping to ensure a seamless transition here at SEMC and to effectively accommodate the sabbatical period currently in place for Pastor Gary. Church Council, along with the support and recommendation of our pastoral team, is very excited to share the hiring of Brandon Post for a half-time interim Director of Worship Arts. Brandon is no stranger to this role, as he was in the director position prior to Joel and left to support his wife Lindsay for education opportunities in Ontario. They have returned and have been actively participating in worship here at SEMC. We are thankful that Brandon can step in immediately and are confident that the transition will be managed well. Brandon was hired previously in this position and is a member of good standing and, as already mentioned, an active member in our music ministry. Church Council and our pastoral team affirm Brandon as our interim Director of Worship Arts. Once Pastor Gary returns from sabbatical, we will revisit the position and how we want to proceed for a permanent Director of Worship Arts. Just a point of clarification though, Brandon's role as interim director would not prevent his ability to be hired in the position permanently. We are very saddened to see Joel leave, however, are very excited for his new opportunity at the meeting place and wish him our Creator's blessings. At the same time, we want to welcome Brandon in this interim position as our Director of Worship Arts and look forward to his unique gifts and abilities and what our God has in store for SEMC in 2020. In Christ's service, Church Council.
You know, all morning I've been saying to people, or starting on Thursday really, when we had our rehearsal, I was like, this is my last music team rehearsal. My last sound check, my last breakfast at Smitty's with the worship team, my last time, man, I've loved being your worship leader. And thanks, Tim. Adam reminded me on Thursday night when we were practicing that This is the first song I sang here at this church. Before I was hired, I was candidating and said, well, prepare a song and then you'll sing it without the music team. And this was the song that I picked. And I've sung it here a fair amount because it's probably my favorite song. You know, there's kind of three kinds of psalms in the Bible. And there's psalms for when everything's going wrong, and there's psalms for when everything's going right. And then there's psalms that are for all the moments in between those ones. And this is one of those. And I love it because it's good in all situations. I always say sometimes we plead this psalm and sometimes we declare it. And it really encompasses how I'm feeling about leaving this church and also being excited about starting a new ministry in another church. I'm going to pray as the offering will be taken up. And I just want to say thank you very much for welcoming me here and for participating in worship here as well. So pray. Father, we thank you for this church, for the various ministries that are taking place both here in the church and with the support of this church in other places. As we take up the offering this morning, we pray that it would go to building your kingdom, that we would pursue ministries that you have ordained and called us to. We pray for the staff of this church, that as you've given them a responsibility and a call to leadership of your people, that you would guide them and fill them with your spirit. Lord, I thank you personally for the time I've had here and the opportunities you've given to me to minister to your congregation. We thank you in Jesus' name. God is my shepherd, I won't be wanting, I won't be wanting. He makes me rest in fields of green, near quiet streams. Even though I walk through the valley of death and dying, I will not fear, 'cause you are with me, you're always with me. Your shepherd's staff comforts me. You are my peace in the presence of enemies. Surely goodness will follow me, in the house of God forever. God is my shepherd, I won't be wanting, I won't be wanting. He makes me rest in fields of green, near quiet streams. And even while I'm walking through the valley of death and dying, I will not fear, in the house of God forever. Amen. You guys would stand with me. We'll sing a hymn together. Number 581, if you want to pull out your hymnals. We'll sing verses 1, 2, and 4. When peace like a river attended my way, when sorrows like sea billows roll, whatever my lot, thou hast taught me to say, it is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. Redeemed, oh, the bliss of this glorious thought. My sin not in part, but the whole is nailed to the cross, and I bear it no more. Praise the Lord, oh my soul. It is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. And Lord, haste the day when the faith shall be sight, the clouds be rolled back as a scroll, the trump shall resound, and the Lord shall descend, freemen so it is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. Amen. You guys can be seated.
Good morning. I would like to call all the little children up front from, I don't know, as old as you can walk to kindergarten, or older if you want to come. Come on up. We have something for you. Don't worry, we'll wait for you. Come closer so you can see. There we go. Okay. I have a question for you. Okay? What is this? Yeah, that's right. It's a sponge. Can you tell me about a sponge? What does it do? How does it work? It soaks stuff up. Right. What does it soak up? Water, maybe. What else? Soap and water? Would you say, yep? Juice. It soaks up probably whatever it's in. Right? So if it's in water, it soaks up water. If it's in juice, it soaks up juice. If it's in soap and water, it soaks up soap and water. Make sense? Right. Okay. Does it ever get rid of the stuff it soaks up? Like, does it just soak it up and keep it? Or does it ever get rid of the stuff it soaks up? When does it get rid of the stuff it soaks up? When you squeeze it. Exactly. Okay. So we have two sponges here, and we also have two bowls with something in them. Can you tell me what's in the bowls? Yep. Water. Okay. Water and juice. Okay, so this is clear water, right? And this is, it's not juice. It looks like juice. It's colored water. Okay? We're going to put one sponge in each bowl, and we're going to let them soak up the water that they're in. Okay? So it's clear water or colored water. Yes. Yes, one is clear water and one is colored water, so there's two different ones. We're going to say, in the meantime, we're going to let them soak up some of the water, and we're going to say that we are like the sponges. Okay? So if we are like the sponges, we would soak up the things we are in. Make sense? So we would soak up the things we're in, the people we're around, the videos we watch, our school, our church, our families, God, all the things that influence our lives. And just like the sponge soaks up the water, the things we choose to fill ourselves with are the things that soak into us. Make sense? Okay. Now, if the things are good around us, everything is fine. But let's say things don't stay fine. Could you say that when things go wrong, we might feel squeezed? Let's say something goes wrong in our life. You think that could be kind of like us getting squeezed, like a sponge gets squeezed? Yeah, I would say. So now let's look at the sponges again. So if we pick up a sponge, what happens to the sponge when it gets squeezed? Water comes out. Well, the stuff that it has soaked up comes out, right? So right now we're squeezing the one with clear water, so clear water is coming out. But if we soak up the one with colored water, what comes out of it? The colored water, right? The same is true for us. If we're soaking in clear water, let's maybe call those godly things. What would you say are some godly things that we might have in our lives? Hands up. Yep. The Bible. What else? Is the Bible the only godly thing in our life? Yeah, what else? Oh, you're waving. What about our friends? Those things influence us? Like they have something to do with our lives? What about listening in Sunday school and church? That's part of our lives, right? What about talking with our parents about God and what we're learning in the Bible? That's part of our lives. What about music? Yeah, if we're listening to Christian music, those would be godly things. The same is true if we're in colored water. Let's call those things ungodly things. So what kind of ungodly things might be in our lives? Say again. What's it? I don't understand. The Herdmans. Oh, from the best Christmas pageant ever. Yes, yes. What did the Herdmans do that you're talking about? They were bad. They made bad choices. Okay. So sometimes our friends around us, or even the stories we read, we write about people who make bad choices, right? Yeah. What about maybe there's some videos that people watch sometimes that aren't really good for you? Sometimes we hear songs that don't really help us love God. Yeah? Okay. Oh, there was bad guys in the movie. Yeah, so 3 of them. So sometimes we see movies and there's bad guys in there and stuff like that. And if we fill ourselves up with that kind of stuff, that's what soaks into us. So like I said, when things are going good, it might not matter so much what we soak up, but it's when things start to go bad that we get squeezed, and those things will come out of us. What do you think would come out of a person who has been soaking in colored water? The ungodly things. What if you're filling your life with bad songs, bad words, bad attitudes? What will come out if you get squeezed? A sponge will come out. Well, probably those things that are in you will come out. So if you're listening to and being close friends with somebody who talks back to their parents a lot and doesn't obey, then you want to be like that, and you soak that up, and then maybe you go home and do that. Or if you're like me, you hang around with a kid that lies. I did that in grade 1. I came home and I lied to my mom. My friend told me my mom would never figure it out, as she knew. She taught me it was wrong. So those are things. So let's say you're soaked up in the stuff that you're come in and something sad or bad happens. You're squeezed and what comes in will come out. So let's take some of the clear water, and we'll squeeze it into the sponge, and then we'll squeeze it into the colored water. What happens to the colored water? Does it get clear? No, it doesn't get clear. Maybe it's a little less colored, but it's still colored. And what happens if we take the colored water and we soak it into the sponge and we squeeze it into the clear water? It becomes colored, hey? And that's like us too. The stuff that comes out of us affects the people around us. Just like the water in the bowl changed, the things we do can change the people around us, either for good or for bad. Yeah, the clear water is now also becoming purple. So if we are, both of them are bad. So that means, you know what that means? It means we need to think about what we are letting soak into us. I have a Bible verse. Oh, and I left my Bible down there, but I wrote it down. I have a Bible verse that helps us remember this. It's in Luke chapter 6. Luke chapter 6, verse 45 says this: "A good man brings good things out of the good stored up in his heart, and an evil man evil things out of the evil stored up in his heart. For the mouth speaks what the heart is full of." So we need to remember And we need to be mindful of what we're filling ourselves up with. We need to remember to fill ourselves up with godly things so that when sad or bad things happen in our lives, people will see Jesus in us. We need to try to be like Jesus that way. Okay, we're going to pray. Can you come sit back down? We're going to pray. And after that, you're going to be dismissed for Shine Kids. So the kids that are 3 up and into kindergarten. Okay, so let's pray. Dear Jesus, thank you for loving us so much and for dying on the cross for us. Please help us remember to fill ourselves up with you so that when bad things happen in our lives, people will see you. Amen. Thanks.
Well, good morning, everyone. It's good to be back again this morning. It's been really good for my wife and I to be with you these weeks, and we look forward to the rest of the time we'll be here. As you know, we've been starting a series, begun a series on the book of Philippians, and we are into week 3 of that series, still in chapter 1. We'll make our way through. And we're looking forward to what God has for us this morning. So far, Paul has, in Philippians, has been talking about, or he's begun his letter with a greeting, the typical fashion in which letters were written at the time. And so we've completed that, and now we're moving into a different part of the letter, which is typical of any letter, and that this is the body of the letter. This is the getting into some of the things that he wants to bring up and wants to discuss with them. And one of the things that Paul wants to do is he wants to assure the believers in Philippi that despite his imprisonment, the gospel is progressing. It is advancing. This is what he's very, very conscious of. This is what his whole life is about. This is what he cares about. And he wants his people that might be wondering about how things are going and his state of mind and everything, he wants them to know that the gospel is not impeded by his imprisonment. So let's read the verses 12 through 18 of chapter 1. I thank my God in all my remembrance. Let's get to verse 12. I want you to know, brothers, that what has happened to me has really served to advance the gospel, so that it has become known throughout the whole imperial guard and to all the rest that my imprisonment is for Christ. And most of the brothers have become confident in the Lord by my imprisonment, are much more bold to speak the word without fear. Some indeed preach Christ from envy and rivalry, but others from goodwill. The latter do it out of love, knowing that I am put here for the defense of the gospel. The former proclaim Christ out of selfish ambition, not sincerely, but thinking to afflict me in my imprisonment. What then? Only that it in every way, whether in pretense or in truth, Christ is proclaimed, and in that I rejoice. Charles Simeon was a Church of England minister for 54 years. From 1782 to 1836, he pastored at Trinity Church in Cambridge. He was appointed by the church bishop against the will of the people, against the will of the congregation. They opposed him, not because he was a bad preacher, he was an excellent preacher, but it was because he was evangelical. He believed the Bible, and he believed in conversion of the soul, and he believed in living holy lives. and in world evangelism. And for those things, the people rejected him. And for 12 years, they refused to let him give the Sunday afternoon sermon. And during that time, they boycotted the Sunday morning service by locking their pews. You can't do that here. You don't even have pews, but even if you had pews, you wouldn't be able to lock them. But in the church in that time, that they were easily able to do that. If I'm correct, often the pews were purchased by families. They had the ability to lock them up. And so for 12 years, Simeon preached to the people in the aisles. They had to stand in the aisles while he preached. Simeon began with 12 years of intense opposition and lasted 54 years. Simeon's experience is similar to the Apostle Paul's in some way. They both possessed a life-consuming commitment to the advancement of the gospel and prevailed despite tremendous opposition and trials. This brings to mind for me what Jesus said about the kingdom of heaven in Matthew 11:12, where he says, from the time that John the Baptist began preaching until now, he says, the kingdom of heaven is forcefully advancing. And there are ferocious people attacking it. Sounds very much like the experience the Apostle Paul had in his life, and to some degree Simeon as well. Facing severe opposition is just what Paul is facing here as he's writing this letter. And he's beginning to open up his heart now to the things he wants to share with them and the things that he talks to them about. And he's telling them. What is he telling them? You might think, well, he might have said, poor me. They're no longer allowing me potato chips and chocolate bars. It's getting tough. Life is bad. No. Nothing like that. Nothing like that. Nothing about his present predicament. Nothing about his previous trials at all. But what he is telling them, no, that's not the issue. I don't care about that. I don't really need you to know all about that. But I want you to know this thing, that the gospel continues to advance despite everything Satan is throwing against it. And Apostle Paul was making sure that his friends at Philippi understood that as far as he was concerned, failure was not an option. It just wasn't an option. That was what his life was committed to. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where you want to do something? You want to do something, and it's very important to you. But everything seems to be working out against you. I can assure you, I know that there are people here, sitting right here, right now, today, whose life feels that way. It feels as if it just never works out for me. There's nothing, there just seems to be opposition at every turn. I want to be a good parent. I want to be a good employee. I want to be a good husband, a good wife. I want to be a good, I want to, but it just seems to be beyond me. It's beyond my grasp. Where are all the youth here today? Just, if you're a teenager, put up your hand a little bit. I don't, there you guys are, and they're all over, spread all over the place. That's good. You're spreading your influence all over the congregation. This is great. Well, I just want all of us to imagine being a teenager for a minute. It's hard for some of us, but nevertheless, let's do that. And you have to get somewhere for something really important. Your very survival depends on you getting there. It's probably something like a party or something. Anyways, your very survival depends on it. And then it happens. You sleep through your alarm. You run to the shower and there's no hot water left. You reach for the towel. There are none. You rush to get dressed and you discover you have no clean underwear. And as you slip on your shirt, a button in a very strategic spot pops off just as you're putting it on. At that point, you begin to wonder whether you shouldn't just go back to bed. Give up. See, Paul wants us, at that moment when we feel like giving up, to have this steely resolve. The gospel must advance. And I want to show you from this text how he brings this out. So the first thing Paul does here in verses 12 and 13 is he brings a report. He offers a report to the Philippians regarding himself. And before I get into that, I need to give you a little bit of background about the Apostle Paul that I haven't given you previously. The Apostle Paul, we believe, became a Christian within a couple of years of Christ's crucifixion. He served the Lord zealously for over 3 decades. During this time, he planted about a dozen churches. He preached innumerable sermons. And he wrote 13 letters, which we now have in the New Testament canon. Now, Paul also had a plan that he wanted to preach the gospel to Spain. But he first wanted to return to Jerusalem for a time. Then on his way back to Spain, he wanted to stop in and visit Rome. Why? Because he had hopes that he might be able to preach the powerful message and the good news of the gospel of Jesus Christ to Caesar and to the Roman government, the ruling government, the most powerful government known at that time. That was his hope, but things did not work out the way he had planned. And instead of traveling to Jerusalem, then to Rome, and finally to Spain, he finds himself in prison, under arrest in Rome, on trial for his life. And what's worse, at the time of the writing of this letter, Paul is thinking and had no confidence at all that he would ever be a free man again. Now, there's a commentator by the name of J.N. Moitier who describes what happened to Paul. He says, what happened began in Acts 21:17 when the apostles set foot in Jerusalem, forewarned by the Holy Spirit that bonds and imprisonment awaited him. An entirely false accusation was leveled at him by his own people. He was nearly lynched in a religious mob and ended up in a Roman prison, having escaped a flogging only by pleading citizenship. His whole case was beset by a mockery of justice. For though right was on his side, he could not secure a hearing. He was made the subject of unjust and unprovoked insult and shame, malicious misrepresentation and deadly plot. He was kept imprisoned owing to official cravings for popularity or for money perhaps, or because of an punctilious facade of legalism. So while Paul now is writing to the Philippians, he's under house arrest, he's chained to a Roman soldier, he still has not had a trial, and his future is uncertain, and Paul looks at all that has transpired in his life and how things have gone for him, and this is what he reports to the Philippians. I want you to know, brothers, that what has happened to me has really served to advance the gospel. That's his report. Isn't that amazing? How could he do that? This is just such a wonderful example to all of us in our plight, in our issues, our struggles, the things that are against us. or we're struggling with the progress of the gospel, and we see it languishing in some places, advancing in others, and what we see here is an example of an apostle who could conclude that most everything in his life had not turned the way he wanted it to. And all he cares about, guess what, folks? It's led to the advance of the gospel. Paul's life was focused on one thing, the advance of the gospel. He was singly focused. Paul had his critics, however, who believed that he had let down the side by getting arrested. Like, when do you get blamed for being arrested? Especially when there's no fault on his part. And they thought that he was to blame for that. They were criticizing and putting him down before other believers and so on, because after all, he had gotten himself arrested. He was now sort of like a criminal, and he was sent to Rome. This can't be good. He can't help us anything from there, and this kind of attitude. And they believed that Paul's zeal was a problem for the gospel. They actually felt that his appeal to Caesar could actually bring Christianity down. So he had his detractors, these people that didn't like him. But Paul isn't finished reporting. Look at verse 13. So that it has become known throughout the whole imperial guard and to all the rest that my imprisonment is for Christ. He had the detractors, he had the circumstances, everything going against him. But he says, it's for Christ. The imperial guard, we believe, was about 9,000 soldiers. Then there was this thing he calls the rest. Fellow prisoners, I assume. This could have numbered thousands of people. Some people have questioned whether or not it is really realistic to think that in the period of approximately 2 years of his imprisonment there, that he could possibly have spread the gospel to all of these people. Well, D.A. Carson, in his commentary, he has an explanation that I think makes a lot of sense. He says, Paul proved to be such an extraordinary prisoner, and his witness so telling that stories about him circulated very quickly. And it was not that each of the Praetorian or imperial soldiers took a turn guarding Paul and therefore heard the story personally from him. Rather, every soldier who was assigned this duty heard the gospel and perhaps something of his testimony and then told others. Paul was neither a hardened criminal, they knew that, and nor was he a suave, sort of white-collar kind of criminal or swindler. So instead of protesting his innocence or gauging his chances of impressing the Caesar's court, he spent his time talking about a Jew called Jesus, who had been crucified at the eastern Mediterranean, and if Paul was to be believed, had somehow risen from the dead. And according to this prisoner, not only will this Jesus be our judge on the last day, but the only hope anyone has of being accepted by God was by trusting in Jesus. That is the message that spread throughout. That's the gospel, friends. In short, Paul was such an extraordinary prisoner that the stories about him spread and circulated throughout the palace, and the gospel message spread with it. And that, Paul insists, is wonderful news. It is a wonderful development. He's not concerned about the fact he's in jail. He's not concerned about he's got his detractors out there. He doesn't care about any of those things. But he is really impressed is that the result of his imprisonment has led to a whole bunch of people hearing the gospel. We cannot prove in any way that Caesar heard about it, but perhaps his dream more or less came true. That his gospel did get preached to the highest levels of the Roman government. Now, what's Paul's reaction after he's given the reports, verses 14 to 17? We'll see here Paul's reaction to this situation, and he points to two things, or to two people, in terms of his response. And in verse 14 and 16, he says, "And most of the brothers have become confident in the Lord by my imprisonment, are much more bold to speak the word without fear." And in 17, he says, 16, "The latter do it out of love, knowing that I am put here for the defense of the gospel." He knew why he was in jail. It wasn't some kind of bad luck kind of situation. He knew he was there because of the gospel, that it was going to be advanced because he was in jail and in chains. So his focus is, first of all, on his friends. And he's saying, sometimes when we go through hardships, or anyone really goes through hardships and difficulties, fellow believers are emboldened by this. And they see how strongly someone is being faithful to God under the worst of circumstances. And it emboldens them and strengthens otherwise timid people to speak up for Jesus. Amen. And that's what we need to see, that not every trial we go through is such a bad, negative thing. Because it can be used, as bad as it might be. We can use it and live it out and live our faith triumphantly through that trial, and it's going to encourage somebody else in your church or in your community to be that much bolder in declaring, yes, Jesus does make a difference. Amen. That is what Paul is saying here. Most of you are too young to remember this. But I do remember this, and if some of you do remember this. 5 Wheaton College graduates felt called of God in the 1950s to reach a group of Indians in Ecuador with the gospel. And they were murdered. All 5 of them were murdered. But there was a wonderful outcome that came as a result of those 5 people dying weeks after they arrived there. What happened was that a very high number of Wheaton graduates who year to year for the next decade or two were committing themselves to similar missionary service. They went right back to the same tribe. Jimmy Elliott's wife went right back with her young child right into that tribe that had murdered her husband. And the result was the gospel was spread. The whole community came to faith in Christ. And hundreds of people went into missions who otherwise might not have because of a trial and in this case, actual death of a fellow believer. That's what Paul's talking about. It's benefiting you, friends. There's people that are more zealous for the faith than they otherwise would be. Secondly, he spoke to his opposition, to those who opposed him. So indeed, some, he says, indeed preach Christ from envy and rivalry. And then in verse 17, they form or proclaim Christ out of selfish ambition, not sincerely, but thinking to afflict me in my imprisonment. It's kind of like kicking a guy when he's down. That's what he's saying. That's what they want to do. I'm already imprisoned. What more do they want? And he says, yeah, that's their attitude. I'm not denying it. There are detractors out there that don't like me and are opposing me. Now, who were these people who were had motives of envy and rivalry and selfish ambition? There's one thing we do know that they're not. They were not heretics. We're very quick to say anybody that opposes us or opposes the church or has a different view of things, they must be heretical. They must be heretics. Don't follow those people because After all, they don't like what we're doing. They don't agree with what our doctrine or whatever, something like that. And these were not heretics. How do I know that? Well, because we are told here that they are preaching Christ. Okay, verse 15. Some indeed preach Christ, but apparently with envy and so on. But they are preaching Christ. They've got the gospel. 17. The former proclaim Christ, but out of a selfish ambition. Paul had warned the Galatians that this was serious business. If they were going to pay the slightest attention to people who were preaching a different gospel. This is what he says. As we have said before, so now I say again, if anyone is preaching to you a gospel contrary to the one you received, let him be accursed. That's serious business to preach false doctrine. But Paul does not accuse these people of preaching false doctrine. He's merely saying they were preaching the true gospel. They just had their motives all screwed up. They were all wrong about that. Paul may have been hurt by these people, by their motives, but because they were preaching and proclaiming Christ, he was glad that the gospel was proceeding and advancing. Oh, what humility. It's remarkable. Then we get to verse 18, which is Paul's, we look at why he was able to rejoice even in the situation of this report. What man, he says, only that in every way, whether in pretense or in truth, Christ is proclaimed, and in that I can rejoice, or I do rejoice. Paul has reasons for rejoicing. One of them is that his focus is singularly, like I said earlier, on the gospel. So if the gospel is advancing, he has something he can rejoice about. He can dwell on the positive. He can dwell on the fact that the gospel is advancing. And that was his ambition, that the gospel would be advancing. His ambition was to go to Spain. He still had new territory, new places that needed to hear about the gospel. And what he was experiencing, these trials and this opposition, he said, they're not false teachers. They're preaching the gospel. And based on that, I can rejoice. Therefore, even under such trying circumstances, he could rejoice when Christ was proclaimed. Paul's example is impressive and clear to us. Make the advance of the gospel the focus of your life. There is not a goal and an ambition you could have that Paul would say would be of such a value that you could neglect or avoid being a proclaimer of the gospel. Your personal comfort, your bruised feelings, your tarnished reputation, your misunderstood motives, all of these are insignificant in comparison with the advance and the splendor of the gospel. You do not need to come to the end of your life and have much, much wealth to be able to give on to your next generation. But if the gospel could be advanced, Paul would say that is the real thing. You can be criticized. You can be maligned. You could be seen as some weird, freakish preacher or somebody that constantly is badgering people about the gospel. And they might be right about saying that about you. But it doesn't matter, according to the Apostle Paul. They said all kinds of silly things about him. He had weird eyes. And they said all kinds of strange things about him. He didn't care. So I ask you, if you were to take a hard, long look at your life, what would you say would be your most highly held ambitions for your life? To get an education? Maybe to get married? Maybe to prevent the world from blowing itself up? Or maybe to ensure Canada achieves its Paris Accord commitments? These are all admirable aspirations. Don't get me wrong. They are legitimate and not to be despised. But their legitimacy is not the issue. The real question is this: have these aspirations that you have and you consider to be the highest in your life, have they possibly become so all-encompassing that what should be a Christian's central aspiration is squeezed to the side or even choked out completely? You know, there's people, the last 20 years have been an interesting time for the Christian church. People have gone to writing all kinds of books. They always have. Jeremiah said, in the writing of books there is no end. But the books have been written all the time, but and some of them good, some of them not good. But and I'm not opposed to it. If I was capable of writing books, I would. But back 20 years ago, somebody like Brian McLaren came along and he started writing this stuff, and the whole emergent church thing came along. He thought he had something new to say. And Rob Bell came along with his Love Wins book and others, and startled a lot of people. And then more recently now we've had this verbal skirmish between John MacArthur and Beth Moore. And you know, friends, what I'm concerned about is this. You can write books. You can say, this is something really important to me. We've got to get this message out. We got to make sure everybody knows that guy's wrong and this guy's right. And we can do that. But in the meantime, people are going to hell. You know, it reminds me of the old medieval times where everybody had a castle. And they had all these castles, and they were shouting back at each other, throwing things, shouting, admiring, alluring, whatever. And then underneath are these masses of people pleading for food. Friends, we can get caught up with good intentions that we devote our life to. But people are not hearing the gospel. Let's pray. Dear God, we come to you this morning and thank you that we've been able to study the Word together. May it speak to us as it should. In your name we pray. Amen.
Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord turn his face towards you and give you peace. As you leave here this morning, go in the grace and presence of our Lord Jesus. You are dismissed.